Before there was a border, before there were maps, before the word Mexico was ever spoken aloud, this land already had a memory. It was written into volcanic stone, whispered by jungles, carried by winds that crossed deserts and oceans alike. This is a place where time does not move in straight lines. Here, the ancient and the modern exist side by side, sometimes colliding, sometimes embracing, always shaping one another. To understand Mexico is not simply to learn its history, but to feel its pulse, a rhythm born thousands of years ago and still beating today. Imagine standing at dawn on the edge of a vast plateau. The air is thin, cool, and carries the scent of earth warmed by the rising sun. Beneath your feet lies one of the most geologically complex regions on the planet. Mexico sits at the crossroads of tectonic plates, a place forged by fire and pressure. Volcanoes dominate the landscape, silent but powerful reminders that this land is alive. Popocatépetl and Iztaccíhuatl rise like guardians over central Mexico, their snow-capped peaks woven into legend and science alike. These forces shaped not only the terrain, but the destiny of the people who would call this land home. Long before Europe knew of the Americas, Mexico was already a cradle of civilization. While ice sheets still covered parts of the northern world, human communities here were learning to farm, to build, to observe the skies with astonishing precision. Corn maize was domesticated in this land, a breakthrough that would later feed civilizations across the globe. It was not simply a crop, it was a revolution. From it grew villages, then cities, then empires. The Olmecs emerged along the Gulf Coast around 1500 BCE, leaving behind colossal stone heads that still stare across centuries with unreadable expressions. No written language explains exactly who they were, but their influence spread far beyond their heartland. They shaped religious symbols, artistic traditions, and political ideas that would echo through time. This was the first great spark. Then came the Maya, whose cities rose from the jungles of the Yucatan Peninsula like stone constellations aligned with the heavens. They mapped the movement of planets, created calendars more accurate than those used in Europe centuries later, and developed a written language capable of recording history, astronomy, and myth. Their cities thrived for generations, then gradually emptied, not vanished, but transformed, leaving behind ruins that still breathe under layers of vines and moss. Far to the west and center, another power would rise, the Mexica, often known today as the Aztecs. They arrived as outsiders, wandering into the Valley of Mexico until they saw an omen, an eagle perched on a cactus, devouring a serpent. That vision led them to build Tenochtitlan, a city on water so vast and advanced that when Spanish conquistadors first laid eyes on it, they compared it to Venice, only larger, cleaner, and more organized. Canals carried food, causeways connected islands, and markets bustled with tens of thousands of people every day. But this world would soon face an unimaginable rupture. In 1519, Hernán Cortés arrived on Mexico's shores. What followed was not a simple conquest but a collision of worlds. Steel met obsidian, horses met foot soldiers, and diseases, invisible and unstoppable, swept through populations with devastating speed. Within a few short years, Tenochtitlan fell. The old gods were challenged, temples dismantled, and a new order imposed. Yet Mexico did not disappear, it transformed. From the ashes of empire emerged a complex colonial society, blending indigenous roots with Spanish influence. Churches rose atop ancient temples, not erasing them but layering history stone by stone. New languages formed, new traditions took shape, and a distinct identity began to emerge, neither entirely European nor entirely indigenous, but something uniquely Mexican. Silver flowed from Mexico's mines, fueling the global economy and tying this land to Europe, Asia, and Africa through trade routes that spanned oceans. Manila galleons carried Mexican silver to China, while spices, silk, and ideas flowed back across the Pacific. Mexico was no longer isolated, it was central. But colonial life was deeply unequal. Power rested in the hands of a few, while the majority labored under heavy burdens. Over time, resentment grew. Ideas of independence, inspired by revolutions across the Atlantic, began to spread. And in 1810, a priest named Miguel Hidalgo rang a church bell in the town of Dolores, calling for rebellion. That cry would echo across the land, igniting a struggle that would reshape Mexico forever. As we move forward, the story of Mexico becomes one of resilience and reinvention, a nation fighting to define itself, again and again, through revolution, reform, and renewal. In the next chapter, we will follow Mexico through independence, upheaval, and the birth of the modern nation, a journey filled with conflict, creativity, and unbreakable spirit. When Mexico finally broke free from Spanish rule in 1821, independence did not bring instant peace. What it brought instead was uncertainty. A new nation stood on ancient ground, carrying centuries of history, but unsure of what it wanted to become. The structures of colonial power were gone, yet the wounds they left behind were still open. Mexico now had to answer a question that would define the next 2 centuries. Who are we, and how do we govern ourselves? The early years of independence were marked by instability. Empires rose and collapsed almost overnight. Mexico briefly became a monarchy, then a republic, then fractured into competing visions of centralized power versus regional autonomy. Borders were fluid, institutions fragile, and leadership often short-lived. This was not chaos without cause. It was the painful process of building a nation where none had existed before. Nowhere was this instability more visible than in Mexico's relationship with its northern territories. Vast lands stretched toward the horizon: Texas, California, New Mexico, sparsely populated but rich in possibility. As settlers arrived and tensions grew, Mexico found itself pulled into conflict with a rapidly expanding United States. The Mexican-American War of the 1840s would leave a deep scar. By its end, Mexico had lost nearly half of its territory. The border shifted, but the human stories did not. Families, cultures, and identities were suddenly divided by a line drawn on a map. Yet even in loss, Mexico endured. The late 19th century brought another transformation under the long rule of Porfirio Diaz. Railroads expanded, cities modernized, foreign investment poured in. On the surface, Mexico appeared to be entering a golden age of progress. But beneath that surface, inequality deepened. Land concentrated in the hands of the few, while millions of rural Mexicans lived in poverty. Progress, it seemed, had a price, and most could not afford it. By 1910, the pressure could no longer be contained. The Mexican Revolution erupted, not as a single movement, but as a wave of uprisings driven by farmers, workers, intellectuals, and regional leaders. Names like Emiliano Zapata and Pancho Villa became symbols of resistance, justice, and rebellion. Zapata's demand was simple yet radical: land and freedom. Villa's cavalry thundered across the north, while political ideals clashed in Mexico City. The revolution reshaped the country in profound ways. It led to a new constitution in 1917, one of the most progressive of its time, promising land reform, labor rights, and national control over resources. It was a declaration that Mexico's wealth should serve its people, not just foreign powers or domestic elites. While the promises of the revolution were not always fully realized, they permanently altered Mexico's political and social landscape. As the 20th century unfolded, Mexico entered a period of relative stability under a dominant political system that emphasized unity and control. Cities expanded rapidly. Mexico City grew into one of the largest urban centers on Earth, a vast organism of concrete, culture, and contradiction built atop ancient lakebeds. Industry flourished, highways connected regions, and a new middle class emerged. But Mexico's identity was never only political or economic. It was, and remains, deeply cultural. Art became a mirror of the nation's soul. Murals by Diego Rivera, José Clement Orozco, and David Alfaro Siqueiros transformed public walls into history books, telling stories of conquest, revolution, labor, and hope. Frida Kahlo turned pain into color, identity into defiance, and personal struggle into universal expression. Music, food, and tradition continued to evolve, blending indigenous roots with colonial and modern influences. Corn, beans, and chili remained at the heart of Mexican cuisine, while regional dishes reflected geography and history. From the deserts of the north to the jungles of the south, Mexico's diversity was not erased by modernization. It was amplified. Yet challenges persisted. Economic crises, political unrest, and the rise of powerful criminal organizations tested the nation's resilience. Migration became both a necessity and a lifeline, connecting Mexico to the United States in complex, deeply human ways. Millions crossed borders seeking opportunity, carrying culture with them, language, food, music, reshaping both nations in the process. Still, Mexico moved forward. By the dawn of the 21st century, Mexico stood as a country shaped by contradiction and continuity. Ancient ruins stood beside skyscrapers. Indigenous languages survived alongside global media. Tradition and innovation coexisted, sometimes in tension, often in harmony. To understand Mexico today, we must look not only at its struggles, but at its extraordinary ability to adapt, create, and endure. In the final part of this journey, we will explore modern Mexico, its people, its global influence, its natural wonders, and the enduring spirit that continues to define this remarkable nation. Modern Mexico is a country constantly in motion, shaped by its past but never imprisoned by it. It is a nation where ancient pyramids cast shadows over modern highways, where indigenous languages are spoken in digital spaces, and where traditions older than recorded history continue to evolve in the present. To walk through Mexico today is to feel time layered rather than divided, each era visible, audible, and alive. Geographically, Mexico is one of the most diverse countries on Earth. Deserts stretch across the north, sculpted by wind and sun. Tropical rainforests thrive in the south, teeming with biodiversity found nowhere else. Two vast coastlines meet the Pacific Ocean and the Gulf of Mexico, shaping climate, culture, and trade. Coral reefs, cenotes, volcanoes, and mountain ranges form natural systems that scientists continue to study for their ecological importance and vulnerability. Mexico is recognized as one of the world's megadiverse countries, home to an extraordinary percentage of global plant and animal species. But Mexico's greatest richness has always been its people. More than 60 indigenous groups continue to preserve languages, rituals, and worldviews passed down for generations. Their knowledge of agriculture, medicine, and environmental stewardship is increasingly valued in a world facing climate uncertainty. At the same time, Mexico's urban centers pulse with innovation. Cities like Mexico City, Guadalajara, and Monterrey have become hubs for technology, art, film, and entrepreneurship, linking Mexico to global creative and economic networks. Mexican culture has a reach far beyond its borders. Its cuisine, recognized by UNESCO as an intangible cultural heritage of humanity, tells a story of survival and adaptation. Tacos, once humble street food, have become global symbols of flavor and identity. Dia de los Muertos, often misunderstood as a celebration of death, is in truth a profound affirmation of life, memory, and connection across generations. Music from mariachi to modern Latin pop carries Mexican rhythms across continents. Mexico's relationship with the United States remains deeply intertwined. Trade, migration, and shared history bind the two nations together in ways that are complex and deeply human. Millions of families live between cultures, creating a dynamic exchange of ideas, labor, and tradition. This connection has shaped North America itself, influencing language, food, and identity on both sides of the border. Yet Mexico continues to face serious challenges. Economic inequality, violence, and political tension remain realities for many communities. Climate change threatens coastlines, water systems, and agriculture, but history shows that Mexico has never been defined solely by its struggles. Time and again, it has responded with creativity, solidarity, and resilience. Grassroots movements protect land and culture. Journalists and artists give voice to truth and memory. Young generations reimagine what it means to be Mexican in a globalized world, blending heritage with innovation. The spirit that once built cities from stone, that survived conquest and revolution, that turned pain into art and tradition into strength, is still present. To understand Mexico is to understand continuity. It is a nation built on layers, indigenous, colonial, modern, not erased, but intertwined. It is a country that remembers, and in remembering it finds direction. As the sun sets over ancient ruins and modern skylines alike, Mexico stands as a living testament to humanity's ability to endure, adapt, and create meaning across centuries. Its story is not finished. It is still being written in villages and megacities, in kitchens and classrooms, in music and memory. Thank you for taking this journey through Mexico's past and present. If this story inspired you, challenged you, or deepened your understanding, support the channel by liking this video, sharing it with others, and subscribing for more cinematic documentaries that explore the world's most powerful stories. Leave a comment and tell us what Mexico means to you. Mexico is not just a place on a map. It is a living story, ancient, resilient, and endlessly alive.